Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host, Connor Rebush. We're here to talk about UFC Fight Night London, Werdum versus Volkov, this week's upcoming Fight Pass card, which I am meaninglessly excited for.
Yeah.
Like, this is exactly what I want out of a Fight Pass card. And I have no complaints. It starts in the morning. It includes a bunch of prospects I'm interested in. There might be some boring fights on there, but if you're gonna start like on a Saturday, for me in the morning at least, for you not, but if you're gonna start early on a Saturday, get me out of here before the evening, and you're gonna fill it with fighters that I'm really interested in seeing for the first time, then I have no complaints.
Yep. It's not even a morning card for me. It's just an early evening card. And even that is enough of a change of pace that I am perfectly excited for this. I could lobby many of the criticisms that I've thrown at recent cards at this one. But honestly, the fact that it's on Fight Pass, combined with the fact that it's been 2 weeks since the last UFC fight, I think this is going to be fun. It's going to feel like 3 hours of fights, and that alone will make it interesting because it's going to go by quickly.
Yeah, and well, I mean, the idea, the happiest idea should be that these products are scaled to the platform. So, a Fight Pass card is fun and not full of no names, and a FX or a Fox Sports card is fun and full of action fighters. And a Fox card is a big deal, but doesn't necessarily have like that one highlight pay-per-view fight that really gets you going. And then your pay-per-view card is supposed to be your huge deal where you're like, oh my God, I can't not show up for this. The fact that Fox Sports to pay-per-view has all been turned into one sort of even keel is not a good thing, but this is a very good Fight Pass card.
Well, let's be honest, Zane, this could very well be a Fox Sports 1 card.
No, this could be a Fox card these days. Have you seen the last Fox cards?
Yeah, no kidding. So I really can't complain about this one. I think it's a pretty interesting lineup for Fight Pass.
It is. So we're going to jump right in here and get going at the bottom, a lightweight bout between Nasrat Haqparast and Narimani.
Yeah, I don't know what I get the feeling there's some kind of matchmaker's joke about the fighters' names or ethnic backgrounds or something going into this one. I don't know what the decision making was here, but it's weird.
Injury late replacement, I think, was the decision.
Oh, is Narimani replacing someone?
Yeah, Narimani is replacing Alex Reyes on like 2 weeks notice.
Okay, all right. I'm psyched about this.
Even less than that. It was he was reported 3 days ago to be the replacement.
Shit. So. Okay, so fortunately for Narimani, who has taken his fight on short notice, he is a fairly experienced guy. He has been fighting on the English and British MMA scene for a few years. I remember very well his exciting loss to Alex Enland in a 5-rounder a couple of years ago. Alex Enland, who I'm still hoping to someday see in the UFC.
He retired, and then
I don't think he officially retired.
I think he was officially retired, and then he came back, and then he lost, I think, or either retired again.
He's had all kinds of shit going on.
Yeah, he got signed to fight. Oh, what's his name? Damn it!
He got signed like a year and a half ago, and then there was an injury, and then
he got signed to fight Martin Bushcamp in 2016. Got injured, retired, came back to fight Kane Musa at ACB 70 last year and lost that fight. So my guess is that you're not going to be seeing Alex Enland anytime soon. He's now 30 and
I know he was
retired once.
He was very good. He was like a cool English Dominic Cruz. With a ground game. But Narimani had a great fight with him in a weird way. This is where I should have said first. these guys kind of remind me of each other. Narimani is like the well-rounded version of Haqparast, and Haqparast is like Narimani with power. But the way that they have like these nice sort of meat and potatoes economical striking games that work well. They know how to keep their shots flowing and mix them up. They don't have to go crazy and brawl. They still strike you as fairly technical. They can counter. They can move well after they hit. But Haqparast is a lot more dangerous than Narimani on the feet. And I honestly think that might be the difference. You combine that with the fact that Narimani has not had a full training camp to prepare for Haqparast, and
is going up a division.
Yeah, I could see Haqparast just kind of catching him cold early on, to be honest.
Yeah, that's kind of my feeling too, is mostly that the pace that Narimani fights at will work really well for Haqparast to paper over the problems in his game. Because, Haqparast, his biggest flaw to date, which we saw in the held fight, is that he doesn't have a deep enough game to win complex, continuous interactions. You tie him up and you get him into a scramble, and eventually he's going to lose out and give up position. You get him into a prolonged exchange, he's going to get hit, and he's going to lose sight of his defense. But Narimani is going to throw one shot at a time, and I haven't, seeing the tape I've seen on Narimani, and like seeing from the Enlund fight and stuff like that, he doesn't seem like the guy who is going to go out and win a scramble if you get him into something really tough. He's going to either get the position and win the position immediately, or he's going to lose the position and lose that position and keep that position lost immediately.
Yeah. I'll say Narimani, from what I saw, did seem to up the pace considerably against Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah.
So maybe he's reached that point in his career where he realizes, like, I need to go and make the fight happen and not be so inactive. And who knows? That could make this very interesting if he's feeling good, and that's why he accepted this fight on short notice. He wants to take the fight to Haqparast. I don't know. Maybe
it also seemed like Pimblett was just an especially good matchup for him in like being in a weaker, less athletic grappler who has to tangle with him.
Tall guy who did not know how to move his head at all. Yeah.
So both guys could get hit, but I kind of do trust Haqparast to be more accurate and hit harder. And if they're going to fight a slow-paced fight, Haqparast, I think I'm going to trust him to take out a very tough fight, basically.
Yeah. I mean, he hung really tough with Marcin Held, and he did not have the requisite experience for that matchup, and made a very good account of himself.
Narimani, I mean, that isn't to say that, I wouldn't be shocked if Narimani just came in, got takedowns, rode out a decision, stayed barely ahead in rounds, and just kind of played on Haqparast's inexperience. But sure. I wouldn't bet on it, especially as a smaller man who tends to need to physically bully people to win fights.
I mean, Marcin Held's a pretty damn good wrestler. It wasn't the wrestling that really allowed him to beat Haqparast. It was the 13 different scrambling moves on the ground that came after the wrestling.
Exactly.
And I don't know that Narimani has that.
Haqparast is the slight favorite, opened at -120, dropped down, not adjusted down, but just dropped down pretty steeply, down to -150, and has gone up and down a little since then, currently at -142. Narimani opened at -120 as well, so this line opened dead even, jumped up to +128, and is currently at +120. So, yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Just especially smaller guy coming in on short notice. Not a really active, not a really hyper aggressive fighter. It seems like a good fight for Haqparast. Brings us to a heavyweight bout: Mark Godbeer versus Dmitriy Sosnovskiy. And I mean,
these are always the most fun to analyze, aren't they?
They are. Like, Sosnovskiy might be bad enough that Mark Godbeer beats him. There's a really solid chance of that. If you see like the tape of Sosnovskiy's last win over some no-name can in Russia and whatever, wherever that he was fighting, and it's just him like wildly rushing in behind punches, getting a takedown, and then the other guy giving up, basically. Mark Godbeer might be good enough to stop that from happening, but I'm kind of not betting on it. Like, I kind of get the feeling that as a pretty unathletic, hittable heavyweight, if Sosnovskiy just kind of runs at him and tries to bully him and pull him to the ground, he's going to get Godbeer on his back and hurt him. Godbeer's wrestling has been always bad, and I don't see that changing. So if Sosnovskiy just runs at him, gets a body lock, gets a trip, gets on top of him, he'll probably pound him out. If not, Sosnovskiy will very likely gas, and Godbeer will take a ugly, maybe a TKO in like the second or third round, as Sosnovskiy just gets exhausted and can't fight, would be my guess.
Yep, I think you nailed it. There are two ways this fight goes. Sosnovskiy wins early because he's big and strong and aggressive, and he can grapple fairly well, and Godbeer can't. Or he loses because he's had an entire short career where that's all he's been doing to people. So, I mean, well, what's the prediction to make? I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go with Sosnovskiy. I think Godbeer might just come out a little too tentative, a little too, not tentative, even just lackadaisical, not really having to be taught to take the fight seriously as he so often does. But, I would not be shocked at all if he won a comfortable decision after riding out a messy first round. So I'm going with Sosnovskiy because what the hell else am I supposed to do?
Pretty much. Sosnovskiy is a foolish favorite. Opened at minus 260, adjusted down to minus 289, is currently at minus 287. Godbeer opened at plus 180, adjusted up to plus 220, and is currently at plus 235, which...
We always say heavyweight odds should never exceed plus or minus 200, but for fights like this, do I even have to say that?
No, this is like this should be just dead even odds, honestly.
They shouldn't even give odds for this
no,
fight.
They shouldn't.
It's irresponsible.
It is. All right, that brings us to a lightweight bout, Kajan Johnson, Stevie Ray.
Boy, it feels like ages since we have seen Kajan Johnson.
Which it hasn't been. He had a huge layoff, and then he fought in September against Adriano Martinez.
Yeah, he had that really impressive knockout over Adriano Martinez.
Which, if you go back and watch that fight, you're like, oh my God, I forgot how terribly boring this fight was.
Yeah. I don't know. I think this one, I'm kind of interested in this one stylistically. Like, Kajan Johnson is, I guess I'll just approach it from this angle. I really think this one may come down to chin. It may just come down to durability. And Stevie Ray is a lot more durable than Kajan Johnson. Johnson has, throughout his career, been very fragile. He has this sort of, he's like Rory McDonald with Michael Bisping's chin. He has this like, I like a lot about Kajan Johnson's style. I like the way he puts his shots together. I like that he uses his jab. I like his footwork. It's not like it's textbook perfect, but he moves a lot and does it well.
I just realized Kajan Johnson spent a lot of time training with Elias Theodorou because they have almost the same style.
Yeah. Almost. Except that Elias has this weird thing where he's never even vulnerable, where like he just like he has this strange ability to drag everyone he fights into that fight.
Well, that's what Kajan Johnson's been working on, though. Like, that's the Adriano Martinez fight, where all he does is stay on the back foot and move side to side, side to side, side to side.
Yeah, that's Adriano Martinez, though. I'm not yet sold on it.
I'm not saying he's like, amazing at it. I'm just saying if they train together, that explains a lot to me.
Yeah, it would explain a lot. Honestly, I really think the thing is can Stevie Ray fall into that kind of fight? And maybe.
The thing is, to me, is that this is going to be two dudes backing up and circling each other, and can they back if they both back up and circle? Will they eventually like accidentally meet each other on the far side of the cage?
Yeah, my new concern is actually that Stevie Ray will probably, if it comes down to that kind of fight, I imagine Stevie Ray will be the first one to decide to come forward. Cajon Johnson's got a ton of experience. He has fought smart fights many times before, and really, like, physicality has been the thing that's held him back more than anything else.
Yeah,
a very long career. And we have seen Stevie Ray rattled in fights before. We have seen him look completely flat against certain opponents. We have seen him fight at too crazy of a pace with other opponents and exhaust himself. And I just think he could be a little more emotionally caught up in what Cajon Johnson might want to be a frustrating fight. And that I'm going to stick with Stevie Ray because I do trust his durability more. I like the way his combination punches flow and the way he puts his shots together. I think if he can force exchanges on Cajon Johnson, he'll come out on top. But if Johnson just like stays tight and denies those exchanges and just tries to pot shot, he might get a Stevie Ray who makes mistakes and loses an ugly fight. So
yeah, I mean, one of the big things that I'm concerned about, and this is a tough fight to pick, is that Stevie Ray is a lot less technical when he's coming forward. He takes much bigger chances to come forward. Like, sure. Both men do want to be on the back foot, circling away, leading people into counters. But Stevie Ray is much more likely to just be like, well, I guess I'll just throw a Superman punch then because this person isn't coming forward enough after me, and I'll just throw like this really awkward sort of stepping front kick or something like that. Whereas Cajon Johnson is much better at keeping his kicks long with his chin back and keeping way outside with his kicking game and just waiting and moving and waiting and moving. So I do feel like Cajon Johnson's more likely to land the first good shot, kind of, because of that. But I'm going to pick Cajon Johnson. I think that Ray's just not going to get a chance to be effective enough to knock him out. And without knocking him out, I think Cajon Johnson's going to land more consistently better.
Sure. I think that is a very fair prediction. Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So it's going to be an ugly fight. It is going to be, like, unless somebody gets knocked out, it is going to be an incredibly hard fight to watch.
Yeah, I was kind of interested in this one on the surface until I thought about it for 1 second.
I'm still interested in it because it's a weird style clash, but when you put two counter fighters in against each other, especially two guys as dedicated to it as they are, like, you're gonna get a mess.
Well, it's that kind of interest where, like, you tune in 3 minutes before the fight starts, you make sure you're there early, and then like 3 minutes in, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go piss.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it starts, and then it's like, okay, yeah, I get
it. I get it. I know how this is gonna be.
Yeah.
I've seen this one before.
Johnson is the underdog. Opened at plus 135, currently at plus 144. And Ray opened at minus 175, currently at minus 172. So, whatever. Yeah. On durability, Ray has the edge on actually, like, fighting a consistently technical fight round to round. A controlled fight round to round, Johnson has the edge. All right, that brings us to a light heavyweight bout. Paul Craig, Magomed Ankalaev. Man, I feel kind of sorry for Paul Craig.
I know, right?
Like, the dude talks a loud game. He's got a lot of bravado, but otherwise he's like a high school teacher or something, like, just out there trying to do his thing. And he is going to get slaughtered in this fight. Like, he will have an opening because Ankalaev fights at a very slow pace, really likes to pick his shots. and is very willing to get takedowns to work his top control. But he's a better wrestler with brutal ground control, or ground and pound rather, than Craig is, and is an infinitely more technical kickboxer who just picks just the right strikes all the time.
Yeah.
Stays highly defensive, moves well, big, is powerful. And Craig is an incredibly wooden striker who throws a lot of kicks with poor setups, pushes himself into the clinch where he can be physically out-muscled, is not a very good wrestler, often ends up just accepting whatever position he can get to drag the fight to the ground so that he can work a submission game that's actually good and aggressive, but it's not a like deep submission game. It's just a hyper-aggressive one, and light heavyweights tend to be pretty bad submission fighters, grapplers, so he's had a lot of surprise wins out of it. But Ankalaev is just really good, and you know he's a Kadyrov guy, so there's that to be unhappy about. But as a fighter, he's
chock full of that super soldier serum. We know that.
There we go.
Whatever the chemists out there in Dagestan are mixing up.
No, it's Chechnya.
Oh, Chechnya. I'm so sorry. I mixed up my Caucasian Russian countries.
But I mean, he's an amazingly good fighter, and this is going to be almost certainly a crushing win for him.
Yep, he is a hot prospect for a reason. The terrifying ground and pound is the thing that stands out. If you've seen some of his finishes, especially that last one over Wagner Prado, where he just scored devastating strikes from half guard after taking or knocking Prado down, I can't recall. I don't like Craig's ground game against that kind of top game. I just think it's a terrible matchup. A guy who is willing to work from his back, who isn't just willing, but prefers to work from his back. That is a position from which he feels effective, and it's going to be a rude awakening when he tries that against Ankalaev. And then on a feet, Craig has some moves as a kickboxer. He's got an okay jab. He's got some nice kicks. He can work from a long range, but he's a little sluggish, and each move he does is not complemented by another move in the way it should be, right? It's like a naked jab. It's the head stays up when he throws it, and there's nothing ready to follow up afterwards. And so it's like, well, you can hit me from far away, but why shouldn't I counter you as hard as hell right when you throw that shot? And that tends to work when good athletic fighters do that. Ankalaev checks all the boxes for somebody who beats a guy like Paul Craig.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't like to necessarily trumpet a record as like indicative of like, oh, you know, this guy having beat these people makes him better than this person.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's, you know, you have to take the matchup in front of you. But it's worth noting that with a couple of exceptions, with two exceptions where he faced a couple of 0-0 nobodies, from day one, every single person that Magomed Ankalaev has faced has been better than him and with a winning record, or has been like had a not better but more experienced with a winning record. Like,
yeah, compare his resume to Dmitriy Sosnovskiy's.
Yeah,
you know, it's a
like,
start.
this is a dude who debuted against somebody who's 10-3. You know,
holy shit.
Yeah, like he is really just incredibly solidly put together from the base up. Odds on this, Magomed Ankalaev is opened at -410, dropped down to -525, and is currently out at -578. Craig opened at +290, jumped up to +409, is currently at +412. Usually you don't want to see odds that long for a debuting fighter, but this is just a really, even off paper, it's a good matchup for Ankalaev. Like, structurally, the way the fight looks, it looks like a really good fight for him.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's Pat Cummins versus John Jones, you don't ever want to have odds like that at light heavyweight. But if it's going to make sense for a debuting fighter, it makes sense here.
Yeah. That brings us to another hot prospect bout, Danny Henry taking on Hakeem Dawodu.
And very hyped about this one as well. Hakeem Dawodu, if you want to know his most relevant recent result, exploded Steven Seiler in a very exciting back and forth fight. And Steven Seiler has all kinds of problems, but he is also a fighter who tests everyone he fights. Like even when like Mike Brown fought him back in the day. Actually, he beat Mike Brown back in the day, if I recall correctly. And has always been in like these weird toe-to-toe, we're grappling, we're exchanging in the pocket, we're boxing at long range. If something can happen in a fight, it all happens in the Steven Seiler fight. And Hakeem Dawodu had that kind of fight with him. It was very exciting. And Dawodu showed, I think, a lot of, I mean, what he really showed is the experience he has from his career as a Muay Thai fighter, that he looked totally comfortable fighting down the stretch and being in exchanges when Seiler would take a good shot and come back at him. Dawodu did not let Seiler have the last word. You could criticize him perhaps and say that he was too invested in not letting Seiler have the last word, but it's kind of a thing you want to see out of a young up-and-comer, is the willingness to not back down, to respond to aggression with aggression, to do what basically like Chael Sonnen on his season of The Ultimate Fighter asked his fighters to do. He talked to them about like having a wrestler's mentality. And if the guy,
maybe hopefully not Chael Sonnen's mentality.
Yeah, but Chael came across as a very good coach. He had some good things.
He does seem like a very good coach. It's that sort of weird, like Tito Ortiz being like really invested in people in the gym and all that. And you're like, oh, you seem like you really like, want to work with these people. And
yeah. Well, yeah, all Chael really wants people to do is for people to listen to him. So it makes sense that he would fall naturally into a coaching role. But he talks about like, oh, somebody drives their elbow into your face, you do it right back right away. You don't let them get away with that. And that's like Hakeem Dawodu with a quite technical and also very explosive, sometimes wild Muay Thai striking game, good counter punching, powerful kicks. He's a lot of fun to watch.
Changes targets well, works the body.
Yeah, body work. I forgot to mention that on Heavy Hands, and I forgot to mention it here. Both times I've had to been reminded, but it shouldn't be something you should forget. His body work is really impressive. He has a great left hook to the body. I'm not sure he'll beat Danny Henry. I think this could be an interesting fight. Henry's never been knocked out. He has looked extremely tough on multiple occasions. He got hit with some heaters in that UFC debut against Daniel Tamer, and he can weather a storm. Yeah. And he is kind of an effective everywhere sort of fighter. He's not a great wrestler. We'll give him that.
He's a bad wrestler.
Yeah, when I say not a great, I mean to say he's not good at wrestling. But he's effective in the clinch. He's pretty good at pressuring. He can fight off the back foot and use his height and length to his advantage. And he can grapple. If this one ends up in like a messy tie-up and goes to the ground, which I could definitely see happening without either guy intending a takedown, then Henry is not at all out of his depth on the ground. So I don't know. Dawodu's still very raw. He has a lot of experience.
Oh, we're going to lose Connor here for a second. Dawodu, raw, inexperienced. Connor, frozen. Mustache is just kind of staring at me now. I was prepared to pick it up and just kind of carry on with the whole conversation, but the reality is that whole that expression at this moment is just kind of creeping me out a little. So hopefully his thing drops out and he comes back here quickly. This is taking a lot longer than it normally does. So hey, there we go. Is he back? Is he back? Not back. Come on. There he is. Okay. Thank you.
Zane. A cat unplugged my internet.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway, I'm saying I think Danny Henry could win essentially the same fight he had against Daniel Tamer. It's not a dissimilar matchup, but I think Dawodu is a little more composed and careful than Tamer was in that fight.
Yeah.
So that is why I'm going with Dawodu.
Yeah, the key for a fighter like Dawodu or Tamer beating Danny Henry is to not fight him the way Daniel Tamer fought Danny Henry.
Throwing everything with everything on it.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, I'm hitting this dude every single time I throw my hands. I should just throw my hands a fuck ton more. It's like, no, back it off a little tiny bit. And Dawodu, I think he's shown a lot of ability to do that. He's fought some dudes who can really wrestle and take him down. And he's fought guys who are durable and can hang with him. And he's shown, I think that's really kind of pushed him to have a consistent minute by minute approach to his output and control to his striking. And I think that kind of control, it should just let him light Danny Henry up, because Henry will be hit by everything Hakeem Dawodu throws. Like, he has no defense whatsoever and seems to rely on having no defense. You know, he's got that Rick Glenn kind of Evan Dunham-ness to him, where it's just like, yeah, you're going to hit me a whole bunch, but I'll still be there. And if you overplay your hand, me still being there is going to be a huge problem. But
like a lot of fighters who seem like innately hittable, it's a problem, but he also responds well to being hit because of it.
Yeah.
It's like him getting hit is like other fighters slipping a punch. Like, okay, that's the trigger. Now I fire back.
Yeah. There were some times in that Daniel Tamer fight where he would get hit hard and then come back with like a nice little body hook combo where you're like, if you can punch like that, why are you taking these shots? Like, but that really shouldn't, like, if he's just going to have a kickboxing bout with Hakeem Dawodu, that should not be enough to that shouldn't throw Dawodu off. Like,
yeah.
And Henry, you know, he could out grapple Dawodu. Dawodu has the bad habit of the moment he hits the mat, he gives up his back. Like, that's just his automatic first response. And then you can see he's practiced fighting off back control and like turning into guard and things like that. But it is an automatic, I hit the mat, okay, give up my back and stand back up. And that's a problem. But Henry doesn't seem like, Henry's just not very physical. Like, he's not very athletic.
Mm-hmm.
So even the fact that he's not a bad grappler, he's not a dominant one because he's not very athletic. He has to really work to hold people down.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't wrestle very well. Like, the takedowns he dropped Daniel Tamer once. And then his only other takedowns came with a lot of pressure against the fence, of having to really grind against the fence and work hard to pull an exhausted opponent down.
Yeah.
So if Dawodu can stuff that, then he'll be fine. If he can't, Henry's going to give him a lot to work with before he shoots. He's not. Henry doesn't seem very eager to like shoot his first shot and pull the fight to the ground. He seems like he's very willing to kickbox. So I would trust Dawodu to do work in that time. I
think it really just comes down to discipline for Dawodu. If he stays disciplined, then he's probably going to win. But if not, I mean, even if his rationale is, boy, this MMA fighter won't go down and keeps coming back and hitting me, I'll teach him a lesson. Like, there are ways in which a fighter like Danny Henry can get the worst out of a prospect like Dawodu. So
yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting. It's a good prospect match for a fighter like Dawodu because it's just it's a very beatable trap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, this guy's going to let you hit him a lot. He's not going to physically challenge you, but he will still be there, and he will be going after you and pressuring you for every round. So if you don't handle that well, you can lose.
Mm-hmm.
Dawodu opened at -280, adjusted up and down to -314, and has fallen slowly down to -339. Danny Henry opened at +200, adjusted up and down to +240 or so, and has climbed up to plus 265. Climbed up as high as plus 280, dropped down to plus 265. I don't have any problems with that. On paper, it's a very winnable fight for Hakeem Dawodu and should be treated as such, but Henry certainly has avenues to win. That brings us to a welterweight bout, Jack Marshman versus Brad Scott. And
what a weird fight, isn't it? Like,
yeah, this is a really strange fight, and I'm not really sure how to pick it. Because Marshman, Scott has this weird thing to him where he's actually a pretty good counter fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But his ability to counter, he's very much like a slightly less aggressive and less natural Daniel Kelly, which is a weird thing to be.
Yeah. Daniel Kelly, the unnatural looking natural.
Yeah, Daniel Kelly is very clearly a very natural fighter. He's just not coordinated or, and he's ancient and kind of broken down.
He's not coordinated or young enough to still be living. Or
yeah. And Scott is kind of the same. Like, he's not coordinated at all. You watch him throwing punches, and they're like these stiff arm punches where nothing seems to move in his body except the arms, but he's got power on it, and he's a strangely natural counter fighter. He's got a really good timing for when and how to throw counters. The problem is that his method of throwing counters is not to slip punches, it's to get hit by punches, and in getting hit, throw counters. That might be enough to beat Jack Marshman. It's really hard to say. Marshman is going to hit harder in, consistently every strike. Marshman throws with a lot of power. He hits hard consistently. But he's also going to just walk forward, throwing the same couple of combinations over and over and over again, giving himself opportunities to be hit. And Marshman might have the worst chin of the two of them. So I don't know. The people that have beat Brad Scott have tended to be able to either out-wrestle him and actually take him down, or they've just been able to outmaneuver him and be slick and stay away and pot shot, pick their points, and just kind of outwork him. I don't really know that Jack Marshman's just wade forward and throw the same couple combinations over and over and over again style fits any of that. So I think I'm going to pick Brad Scott and feel really weird about it. Just because I think Marshman's going to... Marshman will land with power, but I think he's also just going to walk onto shots over and over and over again. You're muted, dude.
Hello.
Hey.
What about the fact that this is at welterweight? Did you mention that while my cats were unplugging?
The other part of this is that both men have dropped to welterweight, and
weird.
I have no... The cut is probably easier for Marshman, who is kind of a chubby middleweight, but I have no idea how either of them will look, because the idea also that Marshman is kind of a chubby middleweight also means that he maybe takes less good care of his nutrition and conditioning and will have a bigger struggle losing weight to get down to a new division.
Yeah, especially if he hasn't cut down on his body fat percentage. That weight is tends to be harder to cut than the water weight that comes with muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's really giving me pause, because I look at Brad Scott at middleweight and I'm like, this man cannot weigh 170 pounds. He's not ripped and giant and muscular or anything, but he's like a heavy, thickly built guy. He looks like a middleweight,
built like a box.
Yeah, he's just very solid. He's got that Brian Melanson kind of build. He's taller than that, but that kind of adds to it. He looks sort of.
He's very much in the Daniel Kelly mold, where you're just like, this is just a squat. Like, I can't imagine Daniel Kelly fighting at welterweight. Can you?
No. Yeah, he looks like a giant in miniature. Like, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like he weighs that much, but it's like, this is a man who's meant to be heavy. And I don't know, that has me somewhat concerned about how he might look here, especially because I don't know when he made the decision to go to welterweight, but this fight was made on relatively short notice.
Yeah.
Because it was supposed to be Marshman versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos.
Yeah.
Which also would have been a goddamn banger. That would have been a great fight.
My guess is he made this decision a while ago because he was lighter and leaner in his Hermanson fight.
Sure.
So my guess is that was a transition fight to the idea of working his way down.
Okay, yeah. Well, if that's the case, then I really hope Scott can look good here. I like Brad Scott. I mean, I like Jack Marshman too. He's a lot of fun, but Brad Scott is a well put together fighter. He's not very quick, but
slower than dirt.
Yeah, which is like really his big problem because otherwise he's very resourceful. He's a good takedown artist when he puts his mind to it. He's got a nice single leg. He's strong in the clinch. He's a pretty good boxer coming forward, can throw nice combinations. And as you said, remarkably good as a counterpuncher. He's got a lot of skill in a lot of different areas and is just kind of slow as dirt, as you said. Wow. I just don't know how he's going to look because I'm totally down with the fight that you prescribed, the fact that Marshman is going to push the pace and that will end up being to his disadvantage. But can Scott maintain a pace at welterweight?
Yeah, I don't know. Like Scott was a reasonably decent late fighter at middleweight.
Yeah.
Like he just kept the same pace all throughout. Whereas Marshman ended up getting tagged up by Ryan James by the end of his fight with James.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you. Like, I think just Scott always just strikes me as a very steady fighter.
Yeah.
It doesn't always come out on top, but he's always Brad Scott. He's always plugging away, just putting on these workmanlike performances. Marshman is like a little too wild sometimes, a little too, I mean, not even sometimes. It's sort of in his nature to go wild. And basically, Marshman beats people who can't handle a wild and experienced opponent. And Scott has seen all kinds at this point in his career. I think Scott can probably come in with the right game plan. So I'm going to agree with you and go with Scott.
Yeah, it's a tough fight. I mean, it could easily be that Marshman just wades forward and sparks Scott out.
Yeah, God knows. Maybe that weight cut is what caused Scott to be so easily manhandled in his last fight. Maybe it's too rough on him. Who knows?
It's an interesting one because I'm not sure how it'll end up either. Odds on it, Scott is a sizable underdog. Opened at -310, and okay, this is really weird. Opened at -310, and then leapt up to +257. So one book
odds like this last week too. Like, what the hell?
One book must have opened really early as an underdog, and then everybody else, or as a favorite, and then everybody else opened as an underdog. Or they had the line like switched or something. I don't know. But it was open like that for like a week. And then now up 256 now at +236, sort of falling down a little. Marshman opened at +230 and then plummeted to -317. He's currently at -302. So like, I don't really see any reason to cut any line between them, honestly. Like, Jack Marshman is 22-7. He's gone win-loss in his UFC career, and a lot of his career before that was just pocked with losses. You know, this is a dude who lost a decision to Scott Askham, who Brad Scott
barely beat. This has all the makings of like a perfectly well matched middle of the road fight.
Yeah, and Scott has gone win-loss for his whole UFC career too. And you know, you can, like I say, the guys who beat him tend to be guys who don't fight anything like Jack Marshman.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems strange to me that they would. I mean, I guess they saw the 5 black Wikipedia names that preceded Marshman's UFC career. They're like, wow, 5 wins in a row before coming to the UFC. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what the logic is behind that.
I don't know either. So that's a little crazy. I'm not saying that I think that Brad Scott is a shoo-in to win, but it's pretty absurd that he's gone from -300 to +250.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Marshman not only lost to Scott Askham, he also lost to Scott Askham's grandfather, Tom Watson. That is remarkable. He fought both of the Colpit Muay Thai practitioners and lost both times.
Yeah.
Poor bastard.
All right. That brings us to a welterweight bout. Danny Roberts, Oliver Enkamp. And yeah, go ahead.
I'm not 100% sure what to make of this fight, Zane. Maybe this is why this Fight Pass card is so interesting to me, because there's a lot of compelling matchups here where I don't really have a clear idea what the dynamics are.
Yeah, well, and prospects Haqparast, Sosnovskiy, Ankalaev, Dawodu, Enkamp, Byrd, like there's a lot of guys on this where I'm just like, I am fascinated to see how you show up. Duquesnoy, like
yeah, a lot of questions being asked in these matchups, and Enkamp is almost in a similar position to Nasrat Haqparast. He looked surprisingly good in his
shockingly good against Nordine Taleb.
Yeah, and maybe
is, by all accounts, a better fighter than Marshman held.
Yeah, Nordine Taleb is very, very good, especially in that kind of fight. But I also wonder if perhaps the fact Taleb's style made it a little easier on Enkamp. We didn't get to see him really pushed and tested. Taleb tried at times to come forward and kind of bully the smaller, younger man, but that's not really in his nature.
No.
And so he sort of allowed a slow-paced kickboxing match. And yes, his technique and precision and experience prevailed, but it did allow Enkamp to show some of what he's got. And it looks pretty good, what he's got. I can hear myself coming through your mic for some reason.
Shit.
Every once in a while it happens.
Yeah.
So what to make of a matchup with Danny Roberts? I mean, obviously the rationale here is both of these guys lost to Nordine Taleb in their last fight. Roberts looked decidedly less competitive with Taleb than Enkamp did, though. However, typically I would favor a guy like Roberts over a young and relatively untested fighter like Enkamp. Roberts has some credible experience. He's had now 6 or 7 fights in the UFC, survived some wars. You could maybe argue, based on that Taleb kick, that his durability is waning somewhat, although I don't think we have quite enough evidence to say that with any certainty yet. Could have just been a really good, crisp shot that struck the right point. Gosh. This might be the hardest one on here for me to call, because I don't really know. Danny Roberts is going to give a similar kind of fight to Oliver Enkamp that Nordine Taleb did, but maybe with enough added aggression that it changes things. Because Roberts is willing to open up more than Taleb is, I think. Especially he's more of a consistent counter puncher. Like if you come after Roberts and throw, he's going to throw back 50% of the time. Whereas Taleb is a little more choosy about when he chooses to return fire. But when Enkamp throws, a lot of it's from kicking range. A lot of it is long range work that doesn't really afford you the chance to counter with punches. And so does that mean that Roberts, in trying to do his usual counter striking thing, gets caught up in a long range kicking battle with a more dexterous kicker? I think maybe that's what's going to happen. Roberts is not a bad kickboxer himself. He's got a pretty good kick, but he's more limited than Enkamp. And yeah, I think I might go with Enkamp. I didn't really expect myself to, but I think the style matchup might suit him. And I do have this feeling that maybe there's something up with Danny Roberts, that he's not going to be around at the top of this division much longer.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, what we've seen from Roberts is that he's fast.
Yeah.
But he's not an incredible, powerful specimen. Like no. He's not he's fast and he is
quick and accurate.
Yeah, he's quick and accurate, but he's not like if you tie him up, he can be muscled around a bit. He's not gonna just physically own the cage as a dominant athletic force. And his game is pretty limited. Like, being an aggressive submission hunter off your back and then a one shot at a time power kickboxer, like, you're really betting on your speed and accuracy to do a lot of work for you. And, like, not only is Enkamp more creative out from distance, which is could very easily get Roberts into a get him to stall on his counters and get him to have trouble finding the timing on his counters, but he's also a more willing and better wrestler. Like, his shots aren't, his wrestling game isn't deep yet because he's a pretty young fighter who's come to it secondarily after his karate. But he's clearly got some good technical things that he can go out and do. Like, he went and he took Nordine Taleb down and got side control and was working that early. He didn't have the depth of technique to finish it up, but it was a good, very capable lockdown side control. And I kind of trust his ability to change that kind of thing up more than I trust Roberts' ability to regularly get arm bars or triangles off of his back when people take him down. And if it's going to be a range kickboxing battle, we've seen Roberts get dropped hard by Dom Steele. And I mean, that Mike Perry fight showed that he can bounce back, but he also got rocked in like every single round of that fight and eventually knocked out. And then he had the Nordine Taleb fight and got knocked out immediately. So,
a brutal sacrificial KO.
We know, if nothing else, that Roberts can be hurt consistently and often.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like what we saw from Enkamp in the Taleb fight is that he's a kid who's got a lot of durability and creativity and doesn't have the depth of technique yet. But if it's going to be a range kickboxing battle and both of them landing power, I trust Enkamp to ride through it a little better and change things up better.
Yeah, my matchmaking instincts, such as they are, tell me that this is like a little too rough for Oliver Enkamp, that maybe after seeing what he was capable of doing in the Taleb fight, you give him some not quite walkovers, but some very passable tests. But as far as the specifics of the matchup go, it might be kind of his fight to lose.
Yeah, you've got somebody who's, you've got somebody I think who's going to fight a Nordine Taleb fight with less durability. Like, even if it's with more aggression
and worse defensive wrestling.
And worse defensive wrestling.
Worth pointing out as well.
So, I'm taking Enkamp too. Odds here. Roberts is the favorite, opening at -230, adjusting up to -180, and currently -189. Enkamp opening at +170, dropping down to +149, and moving back up to +156. I don't know. I'm a little surprised. Roberts, coming off that quick KO loss, is getting favorite odds here, but Enkamp is super raw, so I don't know. I like the matchup for Enkamp.
Yeah, I think that maybe there's some. What was the line on Enkamp again?
Enkamp opened at +170, is currently at +156.
Okay. He's in range now. If he was above +170, I'd be like, I think he's got a pretty good shot here. Otherwise, it's still a close matchup, I think.
That brings us to a middleweight bout: John Phillips versus Charles Byrd. And this is going to be a sloppy shit show, but a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Byrd is unquestionably the better athlete between the two of them. He is faster. He's more dynamic, better able to change direction and to change levels and do all sorts of things like that than Phillips. Phillips is kind of like Jack Marshman, but less nuanced.
Yeah. And with like shorter arms.
Yeah. That said, I'm picking John Phillips because given the opportunity, Charles Byrd almost always makes the wrong decision. Like, almost always. He's very hittable and throws a lot of kicks without setup, doesn't really have any defense built into his style, gets hurt, rushes into the clinch. He kind of bails on his takedown attempts really quickly and then goes back out to range, rushes into the clinch where he will go for sacrifice throws all the time, like nonstop sacrifice.
I love that. One of my favorite wrinkles of any style is when you notice that they love falling to their backs and failing sacrifice throws.
And he succeeds with a lot of those sacrifice throws, but even when he succeeds, he will often just immediately give up position. Like he'll cut to mount or something like that, and you're like, oh, there it is. This looks beautiful. And then suddenly the other guy will be back on his feet. You're like, how the fuck did you just get, like, how did you lose mount that quickly? I have no idea.
And it already feels like the sacrifice throws are an adaptation to the fact that he's off balance all the time. So like he gives people opportunities to take him down because he's off balance, winging shots in front of them. Then they try to take him down, and then he's ready for the sacrifice throw. But like that's a very risky way of fighting. That's like being the guy who baits guillotines in order to get back to your feet. Like eventually somebody's going to choke your ass out.
Yeah. So he's got speed, he's got power, he could shock Phillips, he could get Phillips on his back and hit a submission. He's gotten submissions before, but all of his fights on Dana White's Contender Series were like him losing or almost losing or in this wild brawl of getting hit and then suddenly finding a way to get a submission. And Phillips knows exactly how he wants to fight. There's no bones of like, how am I going to get tangled up with this guy? What do I want to do? No, he's just going to stalk forward and look to throw hooks, and he's going to throw them really, really hard with total confidence that walking forward, eating shots, and throwing hooks back will serve him better than Byrd. And I got to agree with that. Like,
yeah.
Because Byrd, even if Byrd takes him down and gets on top of him, I have no trust that Byrd, the first time he does it, he won't just let Phillips right back up to go back to throwing hooks again. And Phillips hits, I think, way too hard to give him opportunities like that.
Yeah, this feels weird. But like Byrd knows, or Phillips knows exactly how he wants to fight is a very good thing to say. And especially when you contrast that with the implied Charles Byrd has no idea how he wants to fight. Or at least he has no idea how he should fight. He wants to do everything. And yeah, that sort of aimlessness, that letting the opponent's tactics in at almost every opportunity, just constantly engaging, just agreeing to the decisions the opponent makes, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of the Charles Byrd style as we've seen it on the Contender Series. And I don't know, John Phillips only does one thing, but he does it pretty well.
Yeah, that's it. Like, that's the thing, is that if Byrd were a better fighter, I would absolutely pick him to win here. But even like being a much better athlete, most likely than almost everybody else he faces, like there's a reason he's 9-4.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no kidding. And how many southpaws has he faced? Because I can even see him struggling with that a bit. Phillips has a pretty limited game, but he does surprise a lot of people with that left cross counter. Mm-hmm. People throw their right hand at him because that is what the undisciplined fighter does. First things first against a southpaw is just fire the right lead. And Phillips loves that. He loves to counter with that very straight sort of overhand left over the top. Yeah, I can see that kind of shit working against Byrd. I don't know. Like there will still be moments where Byrd can just maybe out of nowhere fling Phillips to his back or get a tiny moment, a tiny opening, and then change the momentum with a massive flurry. All of that I can see working, but if he can't finish Phillips in those moments, then it does kind of feel like a fight where Phillips is going to get the chance to just come back forward and have his fight again.
Yeah. Like,
so I think I have to agree. I think
long term, Phillips is not going to be a big success in the UFC fighting the way he does. But
no, he's going to be like Jack Marshman.
Yeah, but Byrd just doesn't look like he has any structure to his game at all. And Phillips has generally made, anybody who can't make him, doesn't have just the right way to like fight around him, tends to just get knocked out.
Where does Byrd train?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Arlington, Texas. Was he a Team Takedown guy?
I have no idea.
Fortis MMA. What's Fortis MMA? Can you like I don't know if some of it is mental with Byrd, and likely some of it is feeling like a guy who can do anything, so he does do everything.
Mm-hmm.
But he definitely looks like a fighter who could benefit from one of the more renowned camps. Like, can you imagine somebody with Charles Byrd's talent at like a American Top Team?
Yeah.
I would like to see him make that move, but maybe he'll need a loss to somebody like John Phillips to make that decision for him.
Yeah. But he's already had, like I say, he's already had 4 losses for a dude who looks like an elite athlete. Like, this guy looks like he's more athletic than by a good mile than the people that are in the cage with him. Yeah. Just way faster, stronger. Like, the fact that he can hit a sacrifice throw and like actually hit those consistently is a great show of his athleticism.
Yeah, he's more athletic than Kat Zingano.
Yeah.
Because they work more for him than they do for her.
But, you can't win consistently that way. And he hasn't. So.
Yeah.
Odds on that fight, pretty much dead even. Byrd opened at plus 120, adjusted up and down to minus 106, is currently at minus 111. Phillips opened at minus 160, adjusted up and down to minus 113, is currently at minus 113. Dead even odds. That brings us to a welterweight bout, Leon Edwards, Peter Sobota. And, this is you.
I like this matchup a lot. I think it might be a little too much for Leon Edwards in a surprising way. I think that I'm not picking Sobota to win. I'll spoil it right there and say I am picking Leon Edwards here, but gotcha. Sobota strikes me as a very interesting test for like the new path of Edwards' career. He'll test, I think, how well Edwards can put the different aspects of his game together, and also how committed is he really to wrestling and grappling his opponents, and how good is he at doing that against somebody who likes that kind of game? We have seen Leon Edwards, after coming into the UFC as a striker, somebody who was knocking people out and landing sharp counters and fighting slow-paced technical striking battles, he has seriously invested in his wrestling and his ground game, in yielding results that you don't typically see from fighters who used to be specialists in something else. He has been really effective, even in one of the worst matchups he's had against Kamaru Usman. That was like maybe one of the first times we saw much of Edwards wrestling, and it was pretty good. Back then, it was like, oh, he's fighting for head position. He's getting underhooks and these tie-ups. He's scrambling free from takedowns. He is hanging in there with Kamaru Usman in the wrestling. He couldn't stop Usman from wrestling him, but he hung with him. And since then, against more favorable matchups, he has come close to dominating at points some of his opponents with his wrestling. And that's why I like this matchup, because Peter Sobota is a credible wrestler in his own right, but he is also a decorated black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He is a very good grappler. And I don't know if Edwards is going to use his wrestling. If he doesn't, what does he fall back on? Because you do kind of get the sense that in focusing on that, his striking has regressed a bit.
It's not regressed, it stayed exactly the same. Like when Edwards came in, he was this big shot kind of kill artist striker. And it was like, oh, if he develops a little more fluidity, a little more combination striking into his game, if he can get a little more comfortable in the pocket, he could be a really good striker. And instead, he's just kept the one big shot at a time and showed that he's never comfortable being in the pocket and would much rather be a very good wrestler to complement that.
Yeah. And I almost get I floated this theory on heavy hands this week, but I almost get the sense that Edwards, now that he can wrestle quite well, like has that in his mind as a fallback. So it's like, okay, now I never have to fight in the pocket.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever have to develop my striking game. It can just stagnate to the point where it starts to actually deteriorate. And Sobotta's not a bad striker.
Sobotta's actually at this point a more confident striker.
Right. Yeah. He comes forward. He throws bombs. I mean, he tore through Ben Saunders in that last fight. And it's Ben Saunders, doesn't deal super well with pressure, not the most durable guy in the world, but that's not something Sobotta used to do to people. No. And in the same way that Edwards unveiled new levels to his wrestling, in that fight, Sobotta unveiled serious new levels to his striking.
I mean, I think the better show of Sobota as a competently aggressive striker is the fight he had with Nicholas Dalby, where he consistently went after and landed shots on Dalby, pressuring him.
And knocked Dalby down a few times, if I recall.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like this is kind of it feels like more of a coin flip than I would have initially suspected looking at the names, because if Edwards gets a fight on the feet where it feels like he would typically have the advantage, I don't think he's going to get the space he wants to strike the way he likes to. Sobota approached Saunders the way he did because I think he knew Saunders was susceptible to that pressure. And he must know the same thing about Leon Edwards. If he's watched even one of Leon Edwards' last 5 fights, he must know if I get in his face, he's not going to be comfortable exchanging with me. And then if Edwards' fallback is the wrestling, I mean, like Sobota can hang. So it's I almost feel like I'm chickening out picking Leon Edwards because of how I've reasoned this. But then I always worry that I've talked myself into picking the worst fighter or whatever. So I am sticking with Leon Edwards. I'm still hoping for him to turn that corner with his striking, and I think he is still significantly faster than Peter Sobota. He is more agile as well. So if he does decide to use his footwork, he does have it. He's not super comfortable being pressured, but he can move a lot better than somebody like Ben Saunders can to mitigate the exchanges that don't suit him.
Here's a couple other things worth noting too is he's likely also stronger and tougher than Peter Sobota.
Sure.
Who got, folded up by that body kick by Kyle Noak.
Well, his rib exploded. I mean,
did it?
Yeah, as far as I recall, he broke his he snapped a rib with that kick, and that's why Sobota reacted that way.
I don't know if he did. Maybe that is it. He was out for a while, certainly.
I'll look into it while you talk.
You look into it. I thought it was just like a shot to the liver kind of thing, but maybe it was an actual.
Hey, you don't call a man's toughness into question for going down to a shot to the liver either, Zane.
Well, you do. I mean, there are people who take body shots. We all know that, like Donald Cerrone and Matt Brown, they can be the toughest dudes in the world, but they both are weak to the body. The other thing, but mostly just the thing with Sobota is that's always going to be a limiter is that he's just not the most athletic dude in the world. Like, he's got a new dedication to striking, and he's actually become a pretty good striker. But he's not, he's just not the fastest, most powerful guy out there. He's becoming a much better fighter through craft, which is good. And it's also what Leon Edwards has done. And I think that the big thing for Leon Edwards is that his craft is really that he's become a really, really technical wrestler in a way that I don't actually trust Peter Sobota to hang with. Like, Peter Sobota is a very good grappler. Is he the kind of grappler who, when put on his back, is just going to immediately wrap up and submit someone? I don't think so.
Doesn't that feel weird though, that like oh, Leon Edwards is going to have to use his wrestling to beat Peter Sobotta. That seems like such a strange
I mean,
turn
that's
of
who
events.
Leon Edwards is at this point.
Yeah.
You know, like that he used that on Brian Barberena. You know, that is just a major portion of how Leon Edwards fights. He's going to control the pace of the fight through his wrestling.
Yeah.
And
medical suspensions after that loss to Noak, by the way, say just 7 days for precautionary reasons. So
yeah,
Peter Sobotta, pussy, confirmed, absolute bitch, can't handle a shot to the body. You heard it here. Zane Simon said it first.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Real helpful. Real fucking helpful. But no, I mean, I just like the big thing for Edwards that is his concern is fighting more athletic guys who can out wrestle him.
More guys like Kamaru Usman.
More guys like Kamaru Usman. Like if he fought Colby Covington, I would not pick Leon Edwards to beat Colby Covington. You know? Yeah. But Sobotta's not that. Like Sobota is this crafty, kind of wiry welterweight who's also not a great athlete, who's learned to become a much better striker to shock people, and who is still a very good grappler. But I don't trust him to be able to get the initiative on Edwards, somebody who's faster than him, and then who can very likely technically out wrestle him.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you. You made me feel a little better about it. I'm with you.
I'm picking Edwards too. Odds here, Edwards is a sizable favorite. Opened at -300, adjusted up to -190, fell back down to -220. Sobota opening at +220, dropped down to +169, risen slowly up to +177. I do think that Sobota's a reasonable dog here. Like I do think as an underdog, he's got a reasonable chance to win this fight. He's shown a lot of faith in his hands, and that he can use that and time counters well to land shots that drop people. And then he's got the grappling game to follow that up, so that if he can club you, there's a good chance he can sub you too.
But Sobota is in the like Robbie Lawler RDA stage of his career, where he is like a mean old veteran now who is like, you know what, I've seen it all. I'm going to be crazy aggressive and beat people up from now on. So yeah. I in it.
But just like the thing is with Leon Edwards, like he's only ever lost decisions, and they've only been to dudes who were bigger and stronger than him.
Yeah.
Like
fair point.
You know? So until I see it, I'm not going to believe that Sobota is going to has that answer. All right, that brings us to a bantamweight bout: Tom Duquesnoy, Terrion Ware. And this is a good kind of rubber meets the road fight for Duquesnoy, who's been exposed a little. I mean, Duquesnoy came in as one of the world's best prospects, pretty much universally acclaimed by anybody who does a lot of scouting. We thought it, Pat thought it, everybody else. Hyper aggressive, comfortable out of either stance, lots of power, very willing to just wade into the pocket and run a complex clinch game based on changing, getting people off balance, finding openings for hard knees and elbows. A reasonable wrestler regionally, and a very good, solid, functional grappler as well, with great ground and pound. And then it kind of turns out that he's just a little reedy and maybe not physical enough to play the game he wants to play, or he's learned to play. Like that's kind of what we've seen in the UFC, is a bit of the Dan Hooker syndrome, maybe, where it's just like Hooker came in as this really like aggressive clinch fighter who then worked a guard game, and it turned out suddenly, he fought Maximo Blanco. It's just like, you're not physical enough to hang in the clinch with this dude. You can't. and he's had to reinvent himself as a distance out fighter.
How weird is it that
doesn't have the same holes in his game. He's not a guard grappler. Yeah. He's a much more functional range striker. But as a guy who's very willing to wade in and take shots with the idea that if he gets to the clinch, he will own the clinch, that has not been the case for him in the UFC. Patrick Williams took him down a bunch. Now, Patrick Williams is a hyper-athletic, good collegiate wrestler.
But this is bantamweight in the UFC, so
yeah,
so is everyone.
Yeah, and Cody Stamann, who's not the same level, who's a good, I mean, who we've seen is a good defensive wrestler, especially, and a good, capable, physical athlete, but was not that same sort of athletic, decorated high school wrestler that Patrick Williams was, or college wrestler that Patrick Williams was. Stamann was able to use being a more well-rounded, durable fighter to eventually punish Duquesnoy for his constant walking forward, constant walking into takedowns, bully him physically, and kind of wear him down. Duquesnoy just kind of looked like he just kind of lost interest in that fight. Like he was just getting bullied and stopped working, you know? That should not be a problem with Ware at all. Like, Ware is going to be the guy who tries to match Duquesnoy technique for technique, and that should be the right fight for Duquesnoy to shine. Like, Ware's a reasonable offensive wrestler, a reasonable offensive grappler, and a reasonable offensive striker, but is not a great athlete, is not strong, and is open defensively in all those areas. Mostly because he's not athletic or strong. He's not fast. He's not fast enough to stuff shots. He's not fast enough to get his hands in position if somebody's throwing heat back at him and get himself out of the way. So it should be a fight for Duquesnoy to kind of walk him down and pick him apart. But it's also like Duquesnoy needs that fight right now. He needs to remind people that he can do that.
Yeah, and I think Duquesnoy too needs a chance to. I mean, I get the impression from that fight with Cody Stamann that he was also sort of buying his own hype a little bit. That he didn't expect that Stamann could surprise him in any way. He didn't, like, the moment Stamann started to back Duquesnoy up, it was like it almost felt like Duquesnoy had lost the fight. That he was like, oh, I'm not supposed to be passive against this guy. I'm not supposed to have to worry about what he's going to do to me. And to hear him talk about it, Tom says that he was like only working on his striking, that he was only working on a few very specific things for that fight, and then when it changed direction, he wasn't able to adapt, which is a problem that I don't think he's experienced throughout his career. You know, I think Duquesnoy used to be quite adaptable, and you would just sort of ride the fight wherever it went, and it was one of his strengths. Like you pointed out, he's a reasonably good wrestler and all that, but I mean, he's got great timing more than anything, and it makes him a very effective takedown artist. Yeah. And he's a surprisingly good scrambler and submission grappler, both from top position and when somebody takes him down. Like, he can threaten, he can attack, and will use that to get himself back to his feet. He is not without options there, and I think perhaps in this fight we will see him looking to explore those options, to assert those options on his opponent. And I think Ware is a perfect opponent against which to do that. Ware is he throws good hands, nice combinations, good sort of interesting head movement. He's got like a Bernard Hopkins-esque kind of forehead down.
Well, we talked about it. Ware is the epitome of a young veteran. He's a guy who obviously just does all of his trainings by sparring in the gym with other people.
Yeah, by sparring guys better than him. You know, like that's all he has is just being the foil for more talented prospects. And yeah, it has made him very capable. But the holes in his game are there to be exploited by Duquesnoy if Duquesnoy wants them. You know, if Tom comes in here and just tries to strike, Ware might surprise him in the pocket. Ware might hit him with some shocking counters, and especially if he lets Ware back him up. Ware is not super comfortable coming forward. We saw that in his fight with Cody Stamann, where he really needed to pressure Stamann a lot more than he did. But MMA math here, Stamann beat Duquesnoy. Ware was very competitive with Stamann. And if he can, if Duquesnoy reacts the same way, if Duquesnoy gets becomes reluctant or is surprised for something Ware does, then Ware coming forward can put shots together pretty well when he wants to.
I think the big thing is going to be that Ware doesn't have an answer for Duquesnoy's clinch. And that's going to be the thing that, that's been the escape valve for Duquesnoy that hasn't existed for him in the UFC, that he's going to have to eventually solve. But in this fight, it's just it's just going to be there.
Yeah. So, really, this isn't a matchup that I see as one that particularly tests Duquesnoy.
No.
As much as it gives him a chance to...
Yeah, it gives him a chance to remind everyone that he's still a very, very good fighter.
And to remind himself. I think he might need that after that upset loss to Stamen. So,
at some point, I do think he's going to have to unlearn what he eventually developed into a very specific predilection for clinch fighting.
Yeah.
Because he's not a good enough... it was always, I don't have to be a great defensive wrestler if I can get back up really quickly. And then suddenly in the UFC, where your level of wrestling competition is way higher, and guys can put you down and just stay on you and put you down over and over and over again, suddenly you can't depend on I can get the clinch, and if you're going to take me down, I'll just pop right back up. You can't do that every time. He's going to have to figure out how to readjust around that.
Well, what does it say about how the UFC has effectively concentrated athletic talent that Tom Duquesnoy was once effective as a featherweight? And now he looks almost too small to be a bantamweight in the UFC, Yeah. It's crazy.
Odds on the fight, Duquesnoy opened at -350, adjusted up to about -280, and is dropped down slowly back down to -305. Ware opened at +250, adjusted down to +216, and back up to +230, has slowly risen up to +240. I'm happy with that, honestly. I think this is a very good matchup for Duquesnoy. So
yeah, I agree. I kind of expected the odds to be a little wider, but I guess Duquesnoy's loss took some shine off.
Yeah, well, it was a very usually when you see prospects lose, you kind of want to see them lose because of a specific mistake, or you just really you gave up an arm bar to an aggressive submission hunter or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a very slow teardown of his game. And
yeah, it's almost more concerning in a way because he was kind of taken apart on a technical level rather than just caught out for an error he made.
Exactly. Which is why I think it's he needs to reassert. He needs that bounce back.
Agreed.
And that brings us to a light heavyweight bout: Jimi Manuwa versus Jan Blachowicz. And I've lost the thread.
This is you. Me. Well, we're back to this game again.
No, that was the last. I made it to the co-main event. Come on, give me
very well.
credit. I won't do it again. I just didn't have time. I didn't prepare. Whatever.
Prepare.
Boy. Break down the fight, my man.
Well, Jimi Manuwa, you see, is I love when they say Manuwa for his last name. They love those liquid U's in the UK. So it feels weird talking about this fight now because I don't know if people listening to this have heard Heavy Hands this week, but Pat and I had a gigantic argument about this fight, which is now that I look at it, is almost the most uninteresting fight on the card.
Yeah, I don't. You know what?
It was merely because I suggested that Jan Blachowicz, I feel like he can make this more interesting than the first fight was.
Okay.
And
Pat, I can see why Pat would yell at you for that. That's fine.
That makes sense, knowing Pat. But I do think that's the case, right? I still favor Jimi Manuwa here. I think he deserves to be favored. He is much, much faster. He can maintain a pace more effectively than Blachowicz, who has sometimes maintained a pace recently and then sometimes looked like classic Jan again, where he just gets tired.
The only times he's maintained a pace are when other people have maintained the pace for him.
True. Yeah. But he he's had weird moments, like flashes, where it's like, oh, he can fight at a pace when forced to without issue. Like, granted, Igor Pokrayev's not a great opponent, but he was like all fired up and constantly coming after Blachowicz in that fight, and Blachowicz stood his ground and countered constantly. In the Pat Cummins fight, Blachowicz definitely got tired, but got a second wind and fought fairly well. And then the fight with Jared Cannonier was somewhat slow paced, but Blachowicz didn't suffer any effects. I don't know. It is difficult for me to tell whether Blachowicz is actually improving in small but meaningful ways, or if he's just the same guy and the matchups have not been the right ones to tell us. Because who's to say if Jared Cannonier had not approached Blachowicz differently, for example, maybe he had thrown some punches throughout.
I mean, Cannonier won like the third round of that fight just because he was like, oh, maybe if I actually throw punches at the guy.
Yes. Yeah, but the thing is like Manuwa was not a particularly high volume fighter.
No.
And he does tend to pressure. More, that's what he, especially these days, that's what he likes to do, but not with a lot of volume. Even the jab, like, the thing is, Manuwa's own improvements have been very small and subtle.
Yeah.
From his earlier fights. And I think it just makes a bigger difference for him because he's like a great athlete who hits really hard and can explode really quickly. But even that new jab is not like a super consistent part of his game. I think I get this feeling that Blachowicz has some things technically to teach Jimi Manuwa, given the chance. That Blachowicz can actually move his feet well, can work behind an educated lead hand. It depends on how Manuwa approaches this fight. Because the way he approached the last one was he was injured in that one and he just smothered Blachowicz against the fence. But I think we've seen some improvements from Blachowicz's wrestling. Some, like the Cannonier fight, I liked his responses when he got tied up in the clinch. It's not like Manuwa took Blachowicz down over and over. He just held him against the fence.
Yeah, but like that would be the point of that would be my point of yelling at you, which is that I'm actually not sure that he can't just do that again.
Well, but that's why I liked Blachowicz in the Cannonier fight, because he did get forced into a tie clinch. He did get pushed up against the fence, and he responded immediately. He started attacking legs, like he got aggressive to create an opening to get out. And that's not something he did at all against Manuwa, or even really tried to do. He was very passive. So I don't know. I'm still picking Jimi Manuwa. It's just this little niggling feeling I have that Blachowicz, if he can deny those clinches, might be able to fight a technical enough kickboxing match that he can compete with Manuwa rather than just getting shut out the way he did the first time.
Yeah,
because we've seen
that Cannonier is also a couple inches shorter than Jimi Manuwa, so just maybe less physically able to impose himself on Blachowicz against the cage.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Yeah, there's just something I can't watch Jan Blachowicz go toe to toe successfully with Alexander Gustafsson and not be like, man, if just a couple things changed, Blachowicz could be a competitive top 10 light heavyweight.
Yeah, but every time he goes toe to toe with somebody is always when he gasses and then
true
falls apart.
Absolutely true. So I'm still sticking with Jimi Manuwa. I think he's going to put the pressure on Blachowicz. I think he is going to force him into tie-ups when he needs to settle Blachowicz down. And I think if Blachowicz does respond, there's still a very good chance that he gasses himself out trying to fight back. And that doesn't tend to happen.
Also, what we saw in the from Manuwa, what we saw in the Blachowicz fight, which I think is worth mentioning here, is Manuwa's own willingness to lean on countering the jab when Blachowicz threw it with a right hand over it. So that Blachowicz would, like, he throws that jab out a lot, and he threw it out a lot early in the Manuwa fight, and Manuwa just slipped it and threw a right hand over it that cracked him really hard. And Cannonier did the same thing, but he only did it like twice. And then spent the whole rest of the fight being like, how do I defend a jab? What is this punch that comes at me with your left hand?
Just do this for 12 minutes straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There. The Jared Cannonier fight right there.
Not my favorite Jared Cannonier performance, Zane. Can you tell?
Yeah. So I think Manuwa's his own more technical ability to deal with basic fundamental kickboxing means that there's a lot less chance that Blachowicz has of keeping him out at space. And then if it's on the fence, I just trust Manuwa's physicality and his ability to push pace with that physicality more. So
yeah. I think it's just my interest in this matchup is just a projection of my deep-seated fondness for like fighters who just aren't gifted in any way. And what does that say about me? Saying that those are the guys I prefer. That I see someone like Jimi Manuwa, who is like seems like a cool guy and is very talented, and I'm like, I'm jealous. That's what it is. I'm a hater. That's all it is.
Yeah. Down to we figured it out at the core.
It's just like your mom said. If they don't like you, they're haters. Oh.
Maybe your mom said that a lot. I don't know. All right. Opening at Manuwa opened at
a lot of kids not liking me in school. Yeah.
Man opened at -210, fell down as low as -220, and is back up at -214. And Blachowicz opened at +160, adjusted up to +1 as high as +179, and is back down to +172. Kind of short odds for a fight that Manuwa was already really clearly won in a careful kickboxing contest, injured.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's also gotten knocked out since then, so I kind of get it, but still.
Blachowicz beat Latifi, man, with one lucky shot. He can do it here too, okay? He can do it.
He can do it.
Come on, Jan.
Yeah. All right. That brings us to the main event, Fabricio Werdum, Alexander Volkov. And this really comes down to a couple of things. And most of it is, can Alexander Volkov stay on his feet? Because his wrestling defense is bad and has always been bad. But he's well conditioned. So if you are Roy Nelson and you get that early takedown and you push a pace on him and you get tired, he will not get tired, and he'll be there late to tee off on you and stuff shots and stay upright. Otherwise, the big thing, it's hard to pick Volkov here just because out from range, he's really not, he really doesn't like to put anything on his strikes from outside. Like, he might catch you off guard with like a creative kick or with a rushing right hand every now and then. But most of what he wants to do is he wants to throw a very, very pawing jab and really ineffective inside low kicks. They're effective because he's like 6'7" and his legs are just huge. But he really doesn't want to put any weight on any of those strikes at all outside.
He is 100% Joe Rogan's idea of a quote-unquote technical striker. Like, the hands stay up, there's nothing on the punches.
Yep.
That's what technical striking looks like.
And so whenever he wants to actually hurt someone, Volkov becomes a clinch fighter. He throws a couple strikes, bulls his way inside, looks for a plum with one hand, and then tries to throw quick uppercuts or big knees. And that's where he delivers all of his power strikes. The only other way is if he can draw him into a brawl where he's very willing to go with the Struve ideal and just like kind of sit halfway down and just wing hooks as fast as he can and see which one, whether you go down first or he does.
The Struve ideal, you don't sit halfway down. You stay as tall as possible while winging those hooks.
No. Struve, when he actually gets into like the like really mix it up kind of thing, he would always kind of hunch down and like do this like little tiny short arm punches in the pocket where he's just like, any one of these, it's just any moment he's just gonna get cracked and knocked out.
That's what we call using your reach, folks.
Volkov has a much better chin than Struve. So
he's tough as shit.
He's tough as shit. He's unlikely to get knocked out in that way. But it means that every time he wants to hurt Fabricio Werdum, he's going to have to do it by stepping into the clinch where Werdum can get takedowns.
Yeah, and also where Werdum is very good outright as a clinch fighter.
Yeah, Werdum's also just a very good clinch fighter. Otherwise, Werdum's just like what we saw out of him in the fight against Tybura. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is kind of a boring fight" or whatever, but that's as good. That's like the best Werdum has looked since beating Cain Velasquez in 2015.
Yeah. He dominated Tybura. Yeah.
He dominated Tybura, and he did it behind a patient, slow-paced technical kickboxing game where he flashed a lot of jabs and then worked various punches behind those jabs, where it would be like he got Tybura baited with like just a left-right kind of his, what he did against Stipe Miocic that worked so terribly, where he would just rush forward behind a left-right hand interchangeably. But then as the fight went on, he would double up on the jab and then throw like an uppercut behind it, or he would triple up on the jab and then throw the right hand afterward. He's always leading with his left. But he can do it with a little power. He can sneak up and change his approach. He throws good kicks from outside. And just had a very patient in and out Muay Thai game to beat Marcin Tybura behind. So I don't trust that he's going to need that. And if that's all he does against Volkov, there's a very good chance that Volkov might catch him. I think Volkov is the more durable of the two men right now. Even late, when Tybura finally got the idea that he should like settle down and really start throwing some power outside at Struve, or at Werdum rather, not Struve, at Werdum. He hurt Werdum several times, but Volkov doesn't really have the comfort of sitting outside and throwing power like that. It's just not something he likes to do at all.
Yeah, and he especially does not like to do what Tybura did effectively in the last round of that fight, which is to counter off the back foot.
Yeah.
Volkov doesn't really counter at all.
No, and so this is really set up to be a good fight for Werdum, likely one where he gets a takedown and then gets a submission.
Yeah, I agree. For me, this really hinges on how does Fabricio Werdum look. He's had a couple of flat performances recently, but he's also had a couple of flat performances throughout his entire career.
Yeah.
Where sometimes it's just like his head isn't in it and he doesn't look good. And then he comes back in his next fight and it's like, oh shit, he's better than ever.
Yeah.
I think we're past the point of Werdum ever coming into the cage again looking better than ever. But
yeah, he's definitely he's a little less durable than he's ever been before. He's slower than he's been before.
Yeah.
But he's still a crafty fighter, and he's still like baseline heavyweight tough.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And he did look very good in that Tybura fight. He approached it pretty much perfectly. And I think if he approaches this one kind of similarly, he'll have possibly more success than he did against Tybura. Like in a lot of ways, Volkov is a much better striker than Tybura, but in a lot of ways, he's also much worse. And that the thing I pointed to, that Werdum is very comfortable coming forward, throwing layered attacks. And it's not always as ugly as that Miocic 1-2-1-2-1-2 railroad combination. Werdum does a really good job of putting kicks behind his punches. He fights behind an excellent jab. When that jab is working, it is one of the best in the heavyweight division today. And I think Werdum just has, in addition to being able to pressure, which is all Volkov ever really wants to do, is come forward. Werdum has the flexibility to be able to take his foot off the gas and fight a more relaxed long-range fight if he needs to. So if Volkov's conditioning becomes something of a problem, if he does start coming forward, like Werdum is not going to be run over the moment he has to go on the back foot. He can box off the back foot a bit. He can move. He can take angles. He did it against Roy Nelson. He did it in stretches against Cain Velasquez. And look how much Volkov, like even against Roy Nelson, he still struggled until Nelson completely gassed because he could not respond to that pressure the same way that Werdum did, countering with hard low kicks and hard knees and all of that. So yeah, I like Werdum in this fight. And then of course, we haven't seen a ton of great wrestling from Werdum lately, But if he does get Volkov to the ground, that's where he can finish him.
I mean, actually, we kind of have seen some great wrestling from Werdum lately. He went out and put Walt Harris on his back in a minute and subbed him out.
Yeah, we all saw that coming, though. I mean,
yeah, but even still, I mean, it was actually good to see Werdum just go out and do it. Like,
oh, for sure, yeah.
And
but we
haven't
got somebody who's a credible defensive wrestler.
No, but he got Tybura down and took his back in the first round of their fight too, before Tybura just resigned himself to kickboxing from range and losing.
True. Yeah. This won't be a fight where the typical range allows for a lot of wrestling, but I would be surprised if Werdum didn't get Volkov down at some point.
I mean, I think it will. I think Volkov wants to fight inside. Like, he is gonna want to tie up with.
I think Werdum's gonna back him up. Like, I don't think Volkov is gonna get to do much pressuring, except for when Werdum like deliberately takes his foot off the gas to recover.
The biggest thing for me would be that I would hope to see Volkov do is to really lean on. I mean, I don't know. It might get him taken down, but I'd love to see him throw out a few more head kicks in this fight and try to catch Werdum off, just totally off guard from range.
Tybura came close with some of his head kicks.
Yeah. That is where Werdum, like, when he can be surprised outside, that is where he's chinniest. Mm-hmm. When he gets inside and when he is able to have distance closed and can feel body control and knows what's coming, that's where his durability really shines through, and he's incredibly tough to hurt.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird case with Werdum where it's like it's almost like the safest way to strike with him is to try to bomb him from long range.
Yeah,
because when it's an exchange, like, yeah, he's not a great defensive fighter. He's pretty damn hittable, and like Volkov, he doesn't counter particularly well. He can fight off the back foot better than Volkov, but he's also still not a great counter puncher. So it's like, I think that is why like people like Overeem managed to shut him down with this striking. It's like, I'm just gonna put everything into this right hand, and that kind of shocks Werdum a little bit. It catches him off guard. So but Volkov doesn't really do that.
No.
So yeah, Werdum's fight to lose, I think.
Odds on the fight: Volkov opened at plus 175, adjusted up and down to plus 200, and is slowly falling down to plus 164. Werdum opened at minus 245, adjusted up and down to minus 242, and has risen sharply lately up to minus 198. So those odds closing in closer and closer to even. I mean, I don't think that Werdum should be a big favorite here because he is the slightly less durable heavyweight at this point in his career, and that is a big danger.
He's
but
900 years old.
Yeah, but it's heavyweight, and technically I think this matchup really suits him.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give us a thumbs up over on YouTube, on our YouTube channel down below, MMANation.com, DOTCOM, all spelled out. Subscribe, hit the bell, whatever, all that shit. It helps way more than you think. People are just like, oh, really? Why should I like your video? That's just vanity. But YouTube shares shit more when more people like it, so it helps our reach and all that kind of stuff. We're not asking you to pay us anything. And
although if you want to.
Yeah, although if you want to, that's always good too. But then we'll be back not next week or the week after that, but in 2 weeks' time for UFC 223, which I am chomping at the bit for. Ferguson, Khabib, Rose, Joanna, Calvin Kattar, Renato Moicano, Chiesa Pettis, Iaquinta Felder. There's a bunch of fights on that card I'm looking forward to.
A lot of good shit on that.
So in the meantime, we'll have MMA Depressed Us and Heavy Hands coming at you for those next 2 weeks, and all the other shows that we put out on MMANation.com and Bloody Elbow, If I Did It, Sixth Round Retro, all that kind of stuff. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.